Well, hello everyone. Okay, so I'm so excited. This is a CoExist meeting, which I'm recording on the Unabridged MD for the Unabridged and Me podcast. And we already had this guest, so this is going to be a treat for everyone that's here for the CoExist meeting. But yeah, so Cerise McCaston.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny when we just talk and Cerise and Isabel, so we don't say our last name that often.
Yep, that's true.
So anyway, so Cerise is here, and I had such a pleasure interviewing her for my podcast. And because the podcast is a little bit on the shorter side, because everyone, including me, actually, I'm the first one to have a very short attention span. But this CoExist meeting is a little bit longer, which is really awesome. And so there was I really, really love your story. And so, so you are someone who did martial art, then discovered Tai Chi, and then from there, discovered acupuncture. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I really, especially for the CoExist people, I really would love for you to tell us about how you discovered the martial art and what's the link with Tai Chi.
Oh, okay. So I've been working on compacting this story because there's 20 years worth of experience kind of summarized in that. But I started off at 9, and I started with a friend of mine. They were participating in a youth rites of passage program. And so for anybody who doesn't know, in African tradition, a rites of passage program marks the transition from youth into young adulthood or adulthood. So it's a crossing no different than a quinceañera or a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah, or those changing of ages. And so this particular rites of passage program was a summer program, and it was integrated with young men and young women. And we had different aspects of it that were for males, for females. But there was a host of just culture and of African culture, African American culture. And so for myself, that was something that was very near and dear to my heart, of finding spaces that represent my the diaspora, and not just a segment of history, but more a continued expression and more of a living expression. So I started that at 9, and one facet of that was martial arts, and a martial art in the form of Kupigana Ngumi. And I know it's a mouthful to say, right? But
Kupigana Ngumi.
Kupigana Ngumi.
Okay.
So I started training, and my instructor, he was a phenomenal martial arts practitioner, and
it's from China. I just think it's an martial arts that's coming from where?
From Africa. So
it's an African.
So it's an African martial art, and so it's a creolization. Cool. So at that point, when we're have already been here in America, you can't say, okay, it's just African and it's from a specific place, right? So in that representation, there's different forms, different techniques that were taken from different areas or different tribes. And so because we kind of all met here and fused together, it's a crossover of some of those different tribes, but is a martial system in which has locking and grappling and weapons. And so if you're a martial artist, then that means a whole lot. If you're not, then I'm just saying a lot of things. So it's multi-layered, and it's a well-rounded martial arts is the best way to say that. And so I started training with him. He was very big on mind, body, spirit, and the cultivation of the mind, body, and spirit. And so part of that practice was within the martial art. He held black belts in Taekwondo, in Jeet Kune Do. He was a boxer. So he had a very well-rounded expertise in the martial system or the martial aspect. And he was also an acupuncturist. And so he ran a nonprofit organization while also simultaneously running his practice. And so that was my introduction into martial arts. And so prior to me receiving my black belt, I also started training in Tai Chi. And so there are different levels to it, but it's an internal martial art. So
yeah, so I think we have to pause here because most of the people don't know what Tai Chi is.
Okay.
And I do recommend Tai Chi for anyone that has fibromyalgia or chronic pain syndrome, because there's a ton of studies that are showing that it actually helps.
Yes.
So do you want to explain a little bit what Tai Chi is?
Yeah, sure. So Tai Chi, it's Tai Qi Chuan, and so you may see it written in different ways. So you may see TAIQI, which is Tai Chi, and it kind of helps some people do better with the pronunciation of it. It's spelled that way. Traditionally, it's Tai Chi with the CHI, and then the part that gets left off of it is the Chuan. So Tai Qi Chuan, and the translation of it is swimming on land. So the idea is that you learn to move with fluidity, and that there's no breaks or pauses in your energetic or your auric field. And then you can use that combatively, and also to cultivate your mind, body, and spirit, to address any disease manifestations that you may have. So it's a holistic art.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by it. So first of all, when I had my own cancer journey, I actually did Tai Chi, and I wasn't doing the movement Tai Chi. And to me, it was kind of like very interesting. So I was doing the movement inside your body where you're trying to move the chi. So you're trying, like the thing that I've learned is that you're trying to imagine that you have some sort of energy in the middle, and you're like moving it up and then turning it down. And it just made me feel so good. And I was like, I don't know if this is, real or not, but like it makes me feel good. And it's like just this movement of the chi, which I kind of want to go into because that's kind of like what acupuncture is. So can you explain a little bit this movement? So it's a internal martial art.
Yes.
Yet when you're doing Tai Chi, we are saying that we're actually helping the movement of the energy. Is that what it is? Like, what's the...
So there's different layers to it, but so just to touch on, because that's an important part, is an internal martial art and an external martial art. So an internal, to give context, so external martial arts we're very familiar with, your karate, your
judo,
kung fu, and all of these other areas. So they're hard, what we know that we would use for self-defense and learning self-defense, and that's what they're promoted for. Any martial system that is stood the test of time has an internal component. They may not call it Tai Chi, but in order to have longevity in those systems and to become a master, you have to have an internal component. No different than our bodies tend to, without fortification, they will break down. And so that's also a natural part of life. So an external martial art is going to be something that's going to be more forceful. Most people are accustomed to those fighting martial arts. The internal aspect is the practice of cultivation and awareness of that chi that you're talking about. So that center that you were visualizing, it's called your dandian. And so the actual destination or the location of it is 1 inch below your belly button. And so if we can cross over into acupuncture or Chinese medicine, that is where we call like the gate of life. So your kidneys are the first thing to form as a fetus, right?
That's true.
Right. So in Chinese medicine, that's kind of like your holy trinity. That's where your life force or your life gate is held. And then we can cross over to your sacral chakra, or that fire, that passion. So what you're doing is the practice of, that's where that energy, what we call post heaven chi. So you have pre heaven chi, and so
like heaven.
Yes, like heaven.
Okay.
So, and this is the part that there's all of these subtle nuances. So, let me back up just a bit. Chi is a very ethereal kind of thing. The way that we would most express it, or it's been described, is energy, right? So we understand that this energetic current is going through all of these light bulbs, and it's a sort of this intangible thing. And so chi is similar to that. So it can be cultivated, you can use it, you can suppress it. And so acupuncture is the balancing of that, the reading of the body systems, balancing that energy. You can also do the same thing. So it's basically you personally being able to begin to be present and aware to your energetic.
Sorry. My son.
These are the most important things. So when we, so these, so
You were in the
talking
chi
about
and
chi.
yeah. Sorry.
So about chi. So chi is basically, there's each, you have pre-heaven chi,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is what you
pre-heaven.
get from your parents. And so in Chinese medicine, a lot of it is, when you read it or when you interpret it, it's written very poetically. It's written like talking about external evils, and
Okay.
so it's a bit
fantasy type of, yeah. Okay.
right.
Okay.
And so
Oh.
when we talk about these things, you have meridians, or you have power lines. So the same way that we have the power lines and they run from city to city and they connect to major energy grids, you have those same major energy grids inside your body. And so when you have free flow of all of those, then all of your systems are working well. All of your systems are online. They're getting what they need. They're sending what they should be sending, and they're communicating as a whole unit.
Yeah.
And so if you have a break in that, if you have an excess somewhere, if you have a deficiency somewhere, that's where you then have issues. So that's what in Western medicine you would consider a disease.
Yeah.
That's when disease patterns happen. So acupuncture, and so I'm kind of bouncing in between them, but acupuncture, Tai Chi allows you to address them in a preventative fashion. So my observation is Western medicine is very much an emergency medicine. So by the time someone comes to a Western medical practitioner, you're already in a chronic state. That means that your disease has already been in existence for years, most likely. Along the way, you've gotten little warning signs, but we're not taught how to recognize those warning signs, because our Western medical system tells us, okay, go here when you experience that. And there's becoming more and more of a quest to become a bit more preventative. But Chinese medicine allows the more in tune and the more sensitive that you can become to that chi or that energy, the sooner you can pick up that ripple.
Yeah.
So my teacher would sometimes, he would know if someone came in and they had a cold and maybe something wasn't quite right about their energy or their frequency, and he's like, oh man, this is not gonna, and he kind of would feel the ripple. And it's like, and so we would make fun of it, because it was like, there's no way that you could know that, like you picked up a something, or it's like, no, I feel it in my body. But he was just that sensitive.
Wow.
So
And he was right
to the changes in his energetic frequency.
Yeah.
And so we all have our own energetic frequency.
And I think they made some studies that we actually have an aura. You can actually like, and it's always fascinates me personally. I'm just putting this thing that Chinese medicine, especially, there's like so many things that have been described, and we didn't have all the scientific ways to prove that, right? And like the aura, which is like, it is energy, and then like those meridian that you're talking about, like if you actually look at the lymphatic system, literally you can see that they follow the meridians, which I think is so cool. So I'm always very open to all of that as someone that has experienced it. My left brain is a little bit in a fight mode right now with my right brain, because it's like, did we prove this? But I think that we have to stay really open-minded and realize that Tai Chi acupuncture is our arts and medicine art that come from 1,000 years ago, right? And I think it's just a matter of the Western medicine to catch up to this, to actually prove it in their own language. And we are seeing this with meditation, where we're seeing the cytokines, and we're seeing that it decreases cytokines of inflammation. And so I'm excited to think at one point we're going to see this.
And the crossover. And I think it's important to have those conversations. I think it's also important to highlight that so when we also start talking about mind, body, spirit, within the medicines themselves, there's a certain level of mentalism or the psychology of how the medicine. So if we start talking about scientific, right?
Yeah.
You have your scientific method, and that's based on a theory or a
Mhm.
principle, right? And so that theory or principle was once a hypothesis,
Totally.
right?
Yep.
And so that hypothesis was based on a certain ideology and thought process and a culture that created a common understanding of what something means. So I think part of what makes it difficult for that right brain, left brain
Yeah.
of what you're talking about is those are two different ideologies. And so
Yes.
they're rooted in two different thought processes,
Yes.
two different thought patterns. The observations that you make may be slightly different than the observations that acupuncturist or
Mhm.
a traditional medical practitioner. And so just also to highlight that acupuncture or Chinese medicine is not the only natural medicine. It's just the
Totally.
one that I think has gotten as much notoriety as
Yeah.
it has. And so there are standards of measure that we can apply the scientific method to say, okay, if we want to study, this particular
Yeah.
area, I think a lot of it. And so my regard where I'm fascinated is that to see a system that was able to diagnose the diseases that we're learning or have learned to diagnose without ever cutting a body open.
Yeah.
Without ever having to do an autopsy. It's just through observation and understanding how the energetics. And so the language and how you might describe those things are going to be different.
Mhm.
But the ultimate, we could, if I gave you a set of symptoms and someone gave me a set of symptoms, we would write out our diagnoses,
Yeah.
right? And so then based on what I would typify that as, or whatever my diagnosis would be, may be different than what you would say.
Yeah, and I bet we would find the same thing. That's actually, I was just thinking
Yes.
about this, and I was
Yes.
like, it's literally two languages
Yes.
that come to the same thing,
Yes.
but decide to treat it differently,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
And so I think that that's very powerful.
Yes.
And to me, what I really, I'm really about is to say, why choose one or the other when you can have both?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to go back to what's the link to you personally between doing Tai Chi and then discovering acupuncture, or the other way around? Like, what brought you to, I'm going to learn Tai Chi and then, okay, I'm ready to learn acupuncture?
That was that was over the course. So my mentor, my teacher, my godfather, he was both an acupuncturist and a martial artist. So I started practicing with him through martial arts. And then I learned that he was an acupuncturist. I didn't really know a ton about it. And at that time I was, when we really started to discuss it, I was in my freshman year of college, so undergrad, and I was my plan was to go to medical school, and I was majoring in mechanical engineering at that time. And so he and I would just dialogue, and so I knew in my heart and in my mind the work that I wanted to do, which was to help people heal and to like have a holistic healing. I didn't have those words for it
Absolutely.
at the time,
Yeah.
but as I was describing it, and he's like, so that's not gonna really be.
And that's when I told you,
Right,
I
you
told
wish-
you,
yep.
if you had met me, I would have said, oh yeah, we can do this in Western
Yes.
medicine too.
Yes. So I think what he was speaking to is that because of the system, the systematization, not so much with the practice of the medicine, but the bureaucracy that overlays
So
the
true.
medicine, is that would be the preventing factor from being able to help or assist someone in a way that would be holistically meaningful to them. And so there weren't the partnerships that there are now from one to the other. There was not the level of semi-respect. I think that the profession and the practice of acupuncture and Chinese medicine is gaining more notoriety, gaining more respect, but that's also to be acknowledged or seen that it's actually a medical practice.
Very interesting. I just wonder how many of you here have tried acupuncture. So there is, the vast majority of people. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And I have, sorry.
So, and the pain is the biggest thing. People come to acupuncture when nothing else works often.
Yeah. There's a lot of good studies on acupuncture and in pain also. And that's really interesting. So to go to your type of practice, so I'm assuming, and I've already talked to you about this, that you bring both Tai Chi and acupuncture. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit, like, so you have a patient that comes,
Mhm.
maybe they have tried Western medicine, it didn't work for them, or maybe they don't want to try Western medicine just yet. What's your approach to this?
So you're asking my approach if they have tried Western medicine and they're hesitant to try acupuncture,
No,
or
no,
the
no.
other way around?
No, they come to your practice, and
Okay.
how do you, what's your thought process with your patients, and how do you manage them?
Okay. So I think well, not I think, but for me, what's important is understanding what the patient's goal is, right? Why are you coming? Are you
Mhm.
coming because you just want relief? Are you coming because you have something going on that you want to be changed or healed, or you're just looking for something new?
Mhm.
Just because those layers, that process happens as soon as they walk through the door. So we have like observation. I'm looking at, okay, what's their disposition when they come in, right? How do they walk? How are they talking? What is their speech pattern like? Because
Mhm.
all of those things are giving me cues as to what might be going on with them. And but the most important, I think, at the end of before you can begin, is you have to understand or be present to what the patient's goal is.
Mhm.
Because you could write out a beautiful treatment plan, but they're not invested in it.
So what I really am hearing is comparatively to Western medicine, where basically you're really looking at the patient as a Western medicine doc,
Mhm.
right? You're looking at the patient, the symptoms, and you're offering, hey, this is what I think you have,
Mhm.
or this is what you have. So we're like,
Mhm.
this is what you have,
Yes.
and this is the recommended treatment based on the science. You're saying that you're actually much more, like, you're involving the patients more.
There is patient involvement. So there's a fine line. So I'm definitely going to come up with my diagnosis. So I'm going to do a patient intake and I'm going to look at what they're coming to me for.
Mhm.
But the reason why I say to the inclusion, it is very inclusive of the patient, because we can't heal them. They have to heal
Yeah,
themselves,
this
right?
is very
And so
interesting.
if they're not invested, if they're not, and so this starts to go into the psycho-emotional component of health and wellness. So I can put a million needles in a person and they can come see me every week or twice a week or every day for that
Yeah.
matter. And there can be a drastic difference. Two people, same condition. One is invested in their health and wellness. They understand what is actually going on, or learning, putting in the effort and the energy to learn what is happening to them, going to be radically different than the
Mhm.
person that is just experiencing this condition. They're not invested in their healing and they want a band-aid,
Mhm.
or they just are looking for kind of like the next thing. So it really is patient-centered and focused.
Mhm.
And also it's just in a holistic way, it's the most loving and kind thing that you can do for the patient, right? Because if you're suggesting something to them or you're recommending something, and now you're going to spend an hour and a half, or whatever the time is with the patient, and they're not present to it. And so to me, that's a harm or a disservice for everyone involved.
I just have this thought that I want to share, which is that we say that we are, as physician, the witness of our patient's healing process. So basically, it's the patient that heals themselves while you're just basically being the witness of this. And like, I kind of understood this until I started, like, I did not really fully understand until I understood the healing process of our body. When you actually think you need an immune system that's going to go there with different cells, and then like, it really is our own body that are healing. Like, it's our own cells that are healing. And it's really cool to hear the fact that, in Chinese medicine, in acupuncture, you need this. I mean, and you're actually acknowledging this right off the bat, versus, I think, in Western medicine, kind of in, like, it's thanks to my drugs. When you're like, well, yeah, my drug did something, but really it's the patient's body that did the rest.
Yeah.
You're just putting back into balance and helping a little bit. Okay. Is there anything that you want to share for us to understand a little bit more, the concept of acupuncture, maybe like with Tai Chi?
Absolutely. And so, and to be clear, the way that I'm speaking about the medicine is not necessarily how another acupuncturist would speak about it, right? So there's different areas of interest. Some acupuncturists specialize, and they are a bit more clinical, where it is come in, service the patient, and it a little bit more of an assembly line. So there's no different than the spectrum of ideologies and thought processes and cultures. There is a spectrum of practitioners. So I want to be clear about, because not everyone has the same approach. And so with a Western doctor or a Eastern or traditional medicine doctor, it's important to find a practitioner that fits with
Absolutely.
your view process, your ideology. And as far as understanding like Tai Chi and Qigong and acupuncture, I think the biggest thing is it's very simple in this way of, we're taught to think of each person like a landscape. So no different than you look at a picture. You are your own landscape. So your own canvas, your own picture. You have your own seasons. You have your own rhythms, biorhythms. And so to pay attention to some of those things that we're not always taught to pay attention to. So for example, one of our biggest diagnoses or tools for diagnosis is the tongue. You can tell a lot about the tongue. You can tell different organ systems. So even just paying attention, how many of you have ever looked at your tongue and like you just stuck your tongue out and you looked at it, and the difference of what does it look like on the top and the bottom? What color is it? All of these things can be an indicator of what might be going on with you, or just your face. If you have a little bit darkness in a certain area, or you look a little pale, or the texture of your skin. So I think one of the biggest things is self-observation, because you can head off so many illnesses. You can head off or present to or be preventative of certain conditions just through observation, and then having a little bit more knowledge. So taking the time to maybe ask some questions, or if you are in search of a practitioner, just ask some questions. If any of you have questions for me, I'd love to answer them. So those would be the things, is more in-depth self-observation.
Very interesting. Okay, and so for the auditors here, where can we find you?
I am currently on 2nd in Peoria, and so I'm doing Saturday classes for Tai Chi there. I'm on Instagram, and that is the Conduit, and the Conduit Acutherapy, and that's on Instagram and also on Facebook.
Okay, cool. And we'll put all of those things here. So, well, thank you so much. And then just FYI that Honorable MD is still accepting new patients. So if you are interested, come in. Bye. All right. Bye.